Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for coming to our December Openscapes community call. Openscapes is an initiative that helps researchers do better science in less time, and we really center researchers and research teams in our work, helping them transition to open science. And we are really appreciative of you spending this hour with us. This is a reminder that all of our events abide by our code of conduct to support a safe, inclusive, welcoming, and harassment-free experience for everyone in our community. The link to the full code of conduct is in the doc on the top of page 2. And lots of people still joining. And if you have a complaint or at any time need help, Julie and I are both listed as co-hosts, and you can message us or you can send us an email. So our plan for today is to have a conversation with Abby and Chad, and then more of the open leaders. And then we'll monitor the chat throughout, and I'll be pulling questions. So if you have questions, we'll do a verbal Q&A at the end. And in true open leaders style, these notes are very informed by our experiences with the Mozilla Open Leaders, but please add to the notes and share links, and comments and emojis and all of that is welcome. Julie, pass it to you.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Erin, and thanks everybody for being here. We are so thrilled to be able to have this conversation with Abby and Chad, and are so glad that you agreed and were available to have it be an open community call for this conversation. So thank you. So Abby Cabunoc leads Mozilla's developer-focused, trustworthy AI strategy around MozFest and open source. And she founded Mozilla Open Leaders and works to make openness the norm in research and innovation. And Chad Sansing is program manager on the MozFest team at Mozilla. He works on facilitation, leadership, and movement building with Mozilla's internet health and trustworthy AI communities. And I mean, I think you're all here because of your interest in open leadership, and Abby and Chad are just incredible people and leaders in this space. In the doc here, we've listed some of their online resources around the Mozilla Open Leaders program and WOL, which is Work Open Lead Open, and also some of their current work around discrimination in research code. And we're just so thrilled to have you here. I met Abby and Chad in 2018 when I was participating in their 7th round of the Open Leaders program. And what you taught in that program transformed my life, just in the way to think about open, not only in terms of code or data, the way I had been exposed to it, but in a whole style of being. So that was incredibly transformational for me. But also the structure and design of the Open Leaders program, I think, has been so, it was completely new to me. It's unique to anything I've ever seen. And it was something that you so graciously shared in terms of the design as well. So we're just so happy to have you here. So thanks for chatting with us today. So I don't know if you both want to just say a quick hello before we jump into the celebrity interview.
Hi. Sorry, I thought Chad was going to say something. But no, it is such an honor to be here. Thank you so much for organizing this. And it's so fun just to be able to talk about this program and just talk about the design and just see so many familiar faces again. Chad?
Yeah, dittos. What a delight and treat to be here with all of you. And I think that, perhaps the kindness of that introduction can only be matched by how much thanks and appreciation have for all of you doing this work, and all of you who participated in the programs in the past and taught us so much about kind of facilitating them more and more successfully as we went on. So looking forward to the conversation today. I will know, regretfully, I have to leave a little bit early for kid duties, but let's go.
Awesome. Well, thanks. So our first question that we wanted to ask you is if you could give an overview of the Open Leaders program for folks that might not be familiar here on the call, and also the need you saw that led to its creation. So if there was a spark or anything.
Yeah, and I think I'll start with the definition of Open Leaders from our Chad here. But Open Leaders, they design and build projects that empower others to collaborate within inclusive communities. And we really wanted to find a way where we can like create more of these leaders or just have more of these people doing great work around the world. I'll say, so Mozilla Open Leaders, it really started as a mentorship and training program around open practices. And now we have this network of communities that are really running their own open leadership programs around the world. And we'll be hearing from a lot of them. Later, I see, Andre with Open Hardware, Beth there with Open Post Academics, and Yo and Malvika with Open Life Sciences. So I didn't really need to say all of your things, but I'm so glad that you're all here. So it's been really great to see that transform over time and see how we're having these more specialized groups focusing on open leadership and creating these, these communities that are helping others collaborate. So really what saw the spark for me when I was part of Mozilla Science, I was lead developer there. And we had a whole lot of these open source software projects that were great. And we had this giant community of industry engineers and developers that wanted to help. But when we put them together, it wasn't as effective as we thought it would be. And that's where we really saw that need for that open leadership, that when there isn't someone stepping in to do that leadership piece, it is really hard for community to come together and make something good. So that was a bit of the spark for me when I was part of Mozilla Science. And some of you might remember the Working Open workshops. So I think that was the very first iteration of this work. I don't know if Chad wants to add anything there to that question.
My first experience was a Working Open workshop that I got to go to, I think perhaps in Boston. At that time, organizationally, when I kind of became involved with Open Leaders, we kind of shifted from maybe like an audience approach to a more issues-based approach with internet help, for those of you who remember that shift, and have continued to mature and evolve into a focus on trustworthy AI. But coming on to the Open Leadership team, which came into existence after other teams kind of sunset or wound down or were brought together, like the Learning Team or Open Science. With my background, I was really kind of fascinated with what Abby was doing and Xana and others were doing with the developers, and thinking about how to get those project management and community management tools, but also philosophies into the personal practice of folks who maybe we can think of as civil society actors in places like education, the GLAM sector, journalism, some of our past audiences, but also people in those audiences coming to Mozilla for the first time. And so my deeper involvement probably started around Open Leaders 5, I think it was, with 4 or 5 pilot projects where we tried to do a really like an Open Leaders for non-technical projects still related to internet help. So if you worked somewhere in the world and you were not, let's say, a web developer at that time, but the internet was essential to your work for community outreach or organizing or data, something like that, how could we create a similar experience for you? And the pilot group that came out of Open Leaders 5 became its own cohort or 2 in Open Leaders 6 and 7, I think, right?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Wow, that's so awesome. I didn't know that history, so it sounds like it started as to meet the needs within Mozilla for software developers as like a spark, and then could you walk us through the evolution of audiences?
Oh man, okay,
sure. Somewhat.
Yeah, and I think we definitely saw a need in the science community just to help scientists really work in a way that the people who wanted to help them could. So that was the main, to me, that was the main thinking point. Words are hard for me today, it seems like. After that first round, my role actually shifted. So I became a developer engagement manager across Mozilla Foundation. So then suddenly I was thinking about developers from all the different audiences we care about, not just science. So for the next round, I think this is when I started calling it Mozilla Open Leaders. We got people from like the education space, from open hardware, from open arts even, and tried to find projects that we wanted to invest in. And around this time, my husband was also running a startup accelerator here in Toronto. And just seeing that model of like finding people who have good ideas and they want to build something, but then giving them resources, time, skills, and just space to build something great and like make those connections that they need to launch a startup. I thought that could be applied to what we were doing here. So a lot of what that mentorship started as was really modeled on this like startup accelerator piece without the funding and like office space, but really just working with people who have a cool idea, helping them plan it out and like create a plan on how they're going to get somewhere sustainable with the community, and then pairing them with a mentor to just check on them on a regular basis, and then giving them an opportunity to work with the community at like a hackathon or mostly just hackathons is what we did, or at a Moz Fest, I guess. Yeah. So that's when it became more cross-org. And then I think we heard a little bit from Chad on how we started focusing on issues around like openness, digital inclusion. I don't want to list all of them. I always forget one, and it's embarrassing. But just realizing how much that resonates with people from all these different industries was really exciting. So we were able to scale that way. And then we got to a point where we had really started to plateau a little bit with our scaling. And I think we saw the need for these specific communities of practice tab. When people were asking for like, oh, can I have this in Spanish? Or can I have this like for my time zone or for just scientists? It's like, oh, that's what we used to do. But we as a team just can't like physically, we can't like run this. And we also don't have the skills and language knowledge to run this in all the different languages people want or all the different areas they wanted. So then that's when we did Open Leaders X and really teaching people how to run a program like this on their own. Yes, that's my brief overview. I don't know if did I forget? Was that helpful? Did I forget anything? Okay.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. And Chad, do you have anything to add? Or
just that it's extremely humbling and gratifying to see so many open leadership programs continue out of that, but also just the work of individuals and projects. I think there are probably as many, if not more, kind of open leadership ships out on the sea of knowledge right now than would formally call themselves that. And for the little pieces we helped with, it was a tremendous kind of learning experience for me, and has really informed everything I think I've done since for MozFest and other projects of the organization. So I'm very much indebted to the participants and Abby and my other colleagues.
And one other thing to add about the design, I probably should have written all this out beforehand. I apologize for my meandering thoughts. But while the first one was thinking about that like startup accelerator phase where I was doing a lot of the mentorship, actually myself and Aurelia Moser, we were doing the one-on-one mentorship with everyone. By the next round, this is when we started to think of our work as movement building. And I really started to draw on some of my movement building experience. And I saw this opportunity where instead of just me mentoring everyone, and we're only able to mentor probably like a dozen projects each round, there was this interesting opportunity to invite people who'd gone through to come back and mentor others. And that's a nice way for people to sort of multiply themselves to create other open leaders doing open projects. And I thought it was a great learning experience where honestly, I feel like I learn a lot more by teaching than I do the first time around where I'm learning it. So forcing people to teach others and sort of get that like hands-on experience telling someone how to become an open leader. I thought that was a great way to really help us fuel this movement where we want to see more openness happening and we want to see more collaboration happening around the world. And yeah, Daniela's comment there, it's such a great way to empower others.
Yeah. I think the other roles were supremely important as well, like inviting people to come back as community co-hosts, I think was another great way to kind of supply some mentorship on how to facilitate such a thing. And like the little weekly prep meetings, so the micro stands that went along with that, I think were an interesting model. The experts, if you did not necessarily have time to co-host or to mentor, you could come back and be on call for a meeting if a project needed your particular form of expertise. I think that was another great kind of returner role. And I think that was, something especially kind of innovative and forward looking that Abby came up with that is still, perhaps even more important today. Although I've kind of shifted to encouraging people to always co-facilitate, just to keep an eye on both the, to pay attention, I should say, at once to the people and the technology, just because it's so difficult right now with everything people are feeling to like try to manage a Zoom difficulty while also helping people.
Downloading something. Okay, my internet is.
Nope. No. No, thank you both for this. It's so awesome to hear more about this original design, and I love hearing about that that accelerator sort of startup piece of it as well. Erin and I have been reading a lot this year, and especially thinking about how to facilitate group learning. There's like there's books about facilitating group learning and adult learning, and thinking about how folks bring their own projects and work to learning, and so how to kind of build that into the program. And so you've talked a little bit about some of the other influences in the original design, but I just, before we move away from this topic, I just wanted to see if there are any other pieces that we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah, I think just related to that, a big part of Mozilla's history is this service learning piece, or learning by doing. And that's why, that's what we do with a lot of our communities. So yeah, I say we could just teach open leadership abstractly, but like teaching it in a way where people are doing it, I think is really powerful and gives them great real experience. Also, Chad's the education learning person here, so he can probably add more.
This is true. I was just thinking, one of the things I really appreciated about having the opportunity to work with so many people in the program is, oftentimes through the application process and the first few meetings, people would show up with a project they cared about, very deeply, with an idea of what they wanted to learn, what they wanted to improve, how they wanted to, get better. But during the course of our time together, and thanks to their peers in the cohort, thanks to the mentors, thanks to the experts, they would often then, I think, maybe discover something else they hadn't anticipated learning. And, came away, let's say they were there for the project management and they, had an aha moment about community, or they came for the community piece, but left feeling so much more confident as a project manager. As an educator, those were the perhaps most wonderful moments for me, where it's not like a mentor or one of us is saying, oh, but you also really need to take care of this because we've seen X, Y, and Z in your work. It's like a moment where they ask for help with something else they realize is interconnected and would help them get better at that first thing if they were also better at the second or the third or the fourth thing. And having space for that, and a peer learning model, and returners who've been through the program with similar experiences who could support that, it all just fit together very nicely.
Chad, I wonder if you could also say a little bit about adult learning. And I mean, that's one of the things that I think I've been exposed to through your work, is thinking of adult learners, and kind of to that point of like, they're picking up skills that they need immediately. But I wonder if you could just talk a little bit more about that.
Yes, my deepest secret is that I actually don't see adult and children learners as that difficult. And in teaching middle school, would often try to, not treat students as, 25-year-olds or anything like that, but in the workplace, but really kind of meet them where they were and think about later in my teaching career when I got better, what did they want to get out of something? What might be useful or interesting to them? But just in general terms, right? Arriving with that project allows people to bring a whole bunch of background knowledge that they already have, things that are important to them, things that matter to them, ways of doing that they can then question, interrogate, improve upon. So that's one piece, right? People arrive with deep knowledge of their own work that they want to improve. That's super important. And then I think the other piece was just having so many, well, one of the other pieces is having so many examples through the peer-to-peer learning model, the guest speakers, the co-hosts, the mentors, the experts. There was always someone around who could help you consider something. Perhaps, they went through the same thing, or perhaps they were completely new to it, and that brought certain advantages as well. But there was always someone around to help you think through something or think of something from a new perspective, or to tell you a story of their own experience that would remind you suddenly of your own story or a story of someone in your community. And having so many examples to relate to, I think also makes it easier to kind of move something from that short-term memory to the long-term memory. So it's these immediate examples of, this is what we're talking about, this is how it could work, this is how it didn't work, that got into the short-term memory, and then what everybody brought to the table, what they really wanted, what they really knew about their projects and community, that created the connections, and then eventually filtered everything back into habits of personal practice and open and facilitative leadership, I think.
Also, I love that not viewing kids and adults separately, like differently. I think that's meeting people where they are is certainly something that Julie and I have observed from you all and picked up, and has influenced our style.
Yeah. Maybe we can shift into like a harder, sort of messier, trickier piece of this, which is the scaling of it, and how you approach like letting go of ownership, the tension of you being a leader and getting, you know, and helping establish the program, and then how to step back. We're also thinking about the tension of open and freely available, along with invisible labor and attribution and volunteer. And so this is something, you know, we're kind of constantly thinking and iterating on. I was just wondering if you could talk about that, how you approached.
It's really tricky, I'll say that. And I'll say at the beginning, like I could have continued the program just by personally mentoring every project that went through. And honestly, not that I'm the greatest mentor, but like the quality control would have been there. Like I know I can mentor. I had to put a lot of trust in the people coming back who are going to mentor, but I thought there was really good value exchange for them too. And just the opportunity for them to be learning as they're mentoring others, and just giving them those skills to be able to teach others, which is really important in a movement. So I thought that was really core to movement building, being able to let go and just let people make some mistakes. And yes, you'll occasionally have like mentors who flake out part way, or things happen. But overall, I think you get you scale because it's more than I could mentor at once. But you also just you get a much more rich like connections, and you have a community of people who know how to impart knowledge and know how to like share about openness and help others be open, which is what you really need to fuel a movement. So that helped me get rid of some ownership, both the first time with like asking people to be mentors, and then even later on, like ask people to run their own program, where like I really don't have control over the quality of mentorship there. Just knowing that this is what the movement needs, and this is how we see real change. That helped me let go of some ownership. The other tension about things like being open and then relying a lot on volunteer labor, I think if I could, I would pay everyone for doing all this volunteer work. But in lieu of that, we did spend a lot of time thinking about that value exchange. Like, what are people getting out of this, and what limits can I put on their volunteering time to make this really worth it? And just how can I make sure that people come away from this with a good experience, where they're actually learning something and actually getting value out of this, even though I can't pay them to do this. But there still is a reason for them to come, and there's still, I don't feel like I'm just taking advantage of you. Like, I really want you to learn something and grow by going through this. And I think Chad really helped a lot with even just the language of value exchange and figuring out how we can do that. So and sometimes it was as simple as like creating a little like certificate, not a real certificate, but like it's sending that PDF to people that they've like graduated from this, or being willing to write little like recommendations on LinkedIn and little things. I think a lot of people really valued that, but Chad can talk a bit more about that value exchange.
Yeah, I mean, the certificates I think were helpful. The handwritten thank you notes that Abby sent out, and that Many of us then kind of chipped in on it, some all hands. Those were happy memories, sending those letters, or signing those letters, making little notes on them. But yeah, I think the trick is always, well, first of all, please take what I'm about to say skeptically, and understand that it is probably horribly blinded by privilege, and I will mess something up. But when we talked about the value exchange, and we had like a taxonomy of them, and we thought things through and shared things with people, I think the important principles are being mindful upfront of doing everything you can and talking with others to make sure that you're not being extractive or exploitative, and having almost like, a return or a learn or participate by consent kind of model. And many times I think perhaps the benefits for people at their local level when they went back and were able to achieve something new in their project, perhaps were not visible to us, but were visible to them. I do think, Abby did a great job, and we continued throughout my time in the program to have that directory of experts, to have our page recognizing co-hosts, project leads. So we tried to amplify that work. We tried to use platforms like MozFest to amplify a lot of that work. So there were things and opportunities where we saw a chance to connect people with a funder or a new audience or new contributors. We wanted to do that, and we wanted them to feel comfortable, confident going forward as community and project managers, and offer those points of recognition that they could hold up to others in contexts where that was helpful to their projects or to their work.
Yeah, and just to add quickly, even just looking at how movements grow, it's really tough to compensate people for their time in a movement. So I don't know what my point was with this, but yeah, looking at that value exchange and just making sure that people are here because they want to be, but also that they're getting value out of that and they can leave whenever they want to. I think not locking people in was really important to us. So that we renewed your mentorship status each time. It was for a set period of time. We renewed your expert status each time, just to make it really easy for you to leave. I think that was a key to keeping people who actually wanted to be there and who are actually getting value out of this.
Those are all so great, and they're getting captured in the notes, which is also really so wonderful. So being mindful of where we are on our agenda, we could ask you both questions, I think, all day and just kind of keep learning. But one thing I'm particularly curious is if Mozilla Open Leaders, what's something that you've learned that you would have applied back to Open Leaders if you had the chance?
I can start a bit. I think one thing that has been, I know a few of you were at the Code for Science and Society event yesterday with the anti-oppression frameworks in open source. I think a big thing that has been happening around code of conducts and enforcement, and on the call yesterday, even restorative justice. I do think there's been a lot more happening there that we could have brought in. I guess it didn't all exist earlier, but making sure those things, I think we could have fleshed that out a bit more in the curriculum at least. And also, I do think governance, with community governance, I think it all ties back to that. I think whenever there's conflict in a community, the governance makes or breaks it, and whether or not you feel like your leaders have accountability. And I think it's giving people more models and more guidance around that, I think, is what I would do today to help make really positive communities. And that's on the curriculum side.
Would absolutely second those things. And I think perhaps at a super practical level, might reconsider yield a mountain of engagement as something more like a matrix of engagement to better capture the ways people move, all around and occupy different spaces in a project. And one thing that I've been trying to talk about with our Trustworthy AI working group project leads, in addition to, understanding that matrix of engagement, and not every contributor is a unicorn contributor, so to speak, is to be patient with yourself and the project. To really, we talked about this, but I think I would emphasize even more, things change over time, and people and projects are prime examples. But one thing might be to imagine where you are now, where you want to be a little bit in the future. And this plays off the idea of the mountain of engagement. I've been encouraging people to find ways to not say no, right? People's time right now, their emotional labor, their capacity for things is so challenged just by, living and in some cases, right, surviving, that when they show up and they want to help you, that feels like a bigger deal than maybe it did 5 years ago, and it felt like a big deal then. And so I'm encouraging people to think, if someone comes up and you think, oh, well, right now we're really in the middle of development, this person's not a developer, like have an idea of when you're going to get to testing, or have a survey, or have a UX experience that you can just have and use either soon or anytime you need it, and find ways to say yes or in a little bit, and fewer ways to say no, because people showing up now for you is especially significant. And then, of course, in other contexts, it has been especially significant always. But that's just something I have learned to become more aware of and try to talk about more now.
Thanks so much to you both. And I think that's especially, yeah, thanks, Chad, for talking about this time in the pandemic, particularly. Before we switch over to invite some of the other OL groups to share, Chad, I know you're going to have to drop off. So do you have any final thoughts before then?
Just gratitude. And I put some links down below. I hope they're interesting to you. To lift up some work of others, the Open organization, that's kind of the open source folks and community organized loosely by the Red Hat people at that particular Linux company. They've recently published an Open Leaders definition that I think is an interesting evolution and step forward from where we kind of left things with Open Leaders and OLX.
They did?
Yeah, to check that out.
Didn't
Probably
even know
some
that.
old foes, even older foes than me, probably contributed to that. And yeah, I'll close with the gratitude piece. Thank you all. I'm going to go find one of my kids and come back and watch the rest of the recording as soon as I can.
Awesome.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Chad.
Thanks, Chad. So now we were going to switch over to some OLX community shares with starting off with the Open Life Science team. And, this is pretty informal. We were thinking of 5 minutes per group. You're welcome to give 3 minutes of background, and then we can chat a little bit and ask questions. And Daniela, I know you're here as well, and we can have you talk about open peer review too, if there's time, which would be awesome. So Malvika and Yo, if you'd like to share with us, that'd be great. We'd love to hear about how you've iterated from the Open Leaders design and what you're up to with your communities.
Hi everyone, I'm Malvika, and I'm actually going to let Yo talk because she has her video on. My video isn't going to be, it won't survive, but I just wanted to say a little bit about what we are doing from Open Life Science. So we completely are inspired by the amazing work Abby and Chad did, not just in the last cohort where we were building the program, but in really running and sustaining and setting a tone of culture we wanted to build in the digital space. And we really still go back to that. In a way, we learned that was so transformational. Even though we brought one project, it's all the work that we did from that point onward was impacted by Open Leaders principles. So Yo and I connected along with Bernice Batu, who was also a Mozilla Open Leader alumna, and decided to design something for life science because we really thought that this thing should exist for biologists and bioinformaticians. We should actually learn about other ways of sharing our work, which often isn't taught in the universities. So I'll leave at that and let you talk.
Thanks, Malvika. Hopefully they'll fix your internet soon. So yeah, like Malvika mentioned, we sort of coalesced around, we all had bioinformatics backgrounds, so we thought we wanted to see something more sciencey, which is funny when you consider that really that's exactly where Mozilla Open Leaders was born, but we still had the need. And so we came out of the OLX program. We later on actually absorbed also Emmy Tsang, who had been running the Innovation Leaders program, but now is also one of the co-leaders of Open Life Science. And we absorbed her. I feel like I've eaten her or something. This is terrible. Just getting distracted on the way. Anyway, we extended the program a little bit and added some specific modules on research related topics. So whilst we started in bioinformatics and biology, we very quickly spread to include a lot broader. And I think we possibly wouldn't name it Open Life Science anymore. If we were asked again today, it would be more like open research in general or something like that. Because we have linguists, we have archaeologists, we have anthropologists, we have all sorts of fascinating people who've joined and taught us about their fields as well. And the program is slightly longer. It is 4 months, 16 weeks, and we not a whole bunch more I think I can add on this. I guess our model is slightly different. We do run 2 cohorts a year, and we are able to offer small stipends for participation to help encourage global participation, and also small mentor honoraria. That's about it, I think. I will stop occupying space.
Thanks so much, Yo and Malvika. Any questions from anyone in the chat, or feel free to unmute.
How old is the program?
So 2 years old. We're a legal organization now, and we've just launched our 5th cohort, which will be taking the new intake, accepting applications right now.
Awesome.
So one more question, sorry if you don't mind. Are you guys, I mean, you guys run 2 cohorts a year and they're fairly big, right?
They vary. So the last one's been a bit smaller. Sorry.
Right, but my question is more in the sense, are you thinking about scaling in the same way that Open Leaders became OLX? Could you try to branch out and do specific areas of science? Because you also mentioned that you have archaeologists and people that are in different areas and so on.
Kind of. So in terms of like inviting expert speakers for cohort calls and stuff, it's a big overhead. Every time you add a new call, this suddenly needs 3 or 4 more speakers, which has significantly discouraged us from doing that. However, we have plans until at least OLS 8. They're pretty firm, and we expect to investigate sustainability strategies, and it's quite possible that as part of that we may do branching out in the way that you describe. This is something we'll explore over the next 2 years, so I can't say for sure.
Can I also just add, I think we also want to stay connected with all the Open Leaders network, because we don't want to offer everything. This is something that we've decided that we should offer what we can, what we are actually finding joy in. If we start scaling, the joy gets lost a little bit. So I really want to make sure that, we're working with Beth, we're working with you, with Julia, with Daniela, and, making sure people are going to the right program.
Mm-hmm. Thanks so much. And I really appreciate that, all of this, with that last comment about what brings you joy and for your energy, because that's something we've been really thinking about as well as we're grappling with this scaling question too. Well, shall we move over to open hardware with Andre?
Yeah.
So and thanks to the Open Life Science group. Sorry. Yay, Andre.
Yeah, sorry for cutting you there. Thank you for the invite. Thanks also Abby and all the other people who are running open leadership programs. As you mentioned, it's been great to interact. Sometimes it's experts, sometimes it's just somebody to talk about a certain project and so on. And so open hardware, we were initially open hardware leaders as part of the OLX cohort, and we basically ran a pilot. It was me, Julieta Arancio, Alex Cuchera, and Jose Uja. So we were a little bit spread out in Europe. as like people in different places and so on. And this worked quite well, I think. And we had to adapt a lot of things for, hardware, because I mean, at least if you think about developing software, there is a lot of particularities for hardware that basically almost all hardware projects contain software. And so you need to account for those two things at least, right? And then what we did was what I think is most interesting from our experience is that we actually got a little bit of a grant from Mozilla, which we used, and this was just before the pandemic. And so we're going to run an in-person event where people are going to review our curriculum. And then we ended up running this as an online thing where we paid for experts' time to actually review the curriculum of the pilot that we ran. And then with their input, so we did a community and an expert consultation. So first community, people wrote a lot on a Google Doc, right? We tried to polish that a little bit, make like sense of the thoughts and try to organize a little bit. Then we put this up for experts. We really balanced out where the experts came from, what background they had, if they were gender and also ethnicity and all sorts of things that we could think of to balance out, to try to have as diverse as possible input from experts. And they, try to filter that content into something that we are now actually, until now, we're actually finishing this week. We're finishing the updated curriculum and launching the next cohort, which is going to run at this time a little bit differently. So we're going to run this with students at the University of Bath. And then after that one, we're going to run again an online open call, because we basically want to test this and see how this curriculum review went and so on. And I think that's pretty much it from my side. I guess, yeah. So I guess the most exciting part of what we did is actually put all of our curriculum up for review by the community and experts before running another one. Yeah.
Thanks, Andre. Any questions from the group? Yo.
Andre, congratulations on having the next cohort. When can we learn about it, and what will the new curriculum look like?
Right. So, I mean, we do have the curriculum available online, because even the review and everything was, I'm just going to share on the chat the link, and I guess then later on the Google Docs. But it's openhardware.space. And there you're going to find a link to the curriculum. But basically, this is also the website that we created for the program and so on. The new curriculum, yeah, I mean, it, in a way, focused on a lot of things that Open Leaders focused on. But then in our case, focus also, I guess, what is a little bit different is like focusing on the documentation of things like of hardware, because there are so many particularities, and there is, I mean, I guess every single different area has their own particularities, right? But we focus on these particularities of hardware because you need to, yeah, otherwise, I mean, it's already difficult enough to use software. And so if you don't have a properly documented hardware, we actually have to buy things and put them together, then it becomes impossible, right? Yeah, and so we're definitely going to write about this and make this publicly available, the information about the cohort and so on. I think the other interesting thing is that we created, and this is still very prototypical, an open hardware leaders or makers canvas, right? So there is a little canvas that we changed the open leaders one to incorporate like things that were more fitting to our program. Does that answer your question? Sorry, Joe. Okay.
Just to add, the open canvas was already remixed from Lean Canvas, which my husband was using at the Startup Accelerator. So it's like, it's continually remixed. Openness, it's great.
That's awesome. Thanks, Andre. Beth and Bo, would you like to share about Open Postdoc?
Yeah, I'll jump in first. First of all, I just love seeing all the folks here because it's really fun to see folks from all the different parts of the open communities that we've been engaged in. And Abby and Chad's work is like lives on, which is pretty awesome. So I'll talk a little bit about Open Post Acts, and also just and then I wanted to just share a couple of things that I think have come out of Open Leaders that we've seen continue in our group, which is kind of a fun thing to see the strains of things. And then ask Bo if he wants to jump in with anything. So first of all, I had the best mentor ever. Julie was my mentor for Open Leaders. So I was super set up for success. But Open Post Academics came out of this idea that folks were leaving academia or had a PhD and didn't know how to share their skills and knowledge more openly, especially in the social sciences and the humanities. So we've moved from there. We had one cohort and then the pandemic happened. And what we found is that most folks really needed community and they needed ongoing workshops, basically focused on what they specifically were engaging with, things like academic toxicity, how to get a job, what kinds of things they might do next. And so we tapped into our community to do ongoing workshops as we went along. This past year, we got a grant from Code for Science and Society to do a workshop on interdisciplinary discussions, which ended up with, and we're putting the finishing touches on it right now. We've got a working paper, it's called a toolkit for cross-disciplinary work. And so that'll be coming out hopefully in the next, honestly, couple of weeks. But that's been a really neat project to pull folks together from the computer science and sort of data science community, and also folks who might not see themselves as really in that community. Maybe they come from linguistics or they come from fields where they don't necessarily know how to code, but they have something to offer. And so we were trying to make those connections more explicit and talk about how cross-disciplinary work can happen. A few things that have kind of emerged from Open Post Academics, which has been really neat and from the community, is folks have started to create their own communities. So we've got a number of them that have come out. One person in particular works on trying to create inclusive pedagogy. So how do you get people to teach more inclusively? So she's got a community on that. We've got folks doing creating movies in other countries, and it's really there's some really cool there's some bunch of linguists that have gone into and presented at a workshop, essentially trying to share sort of more of their skills and knowledge more openly. And I'll just say this sounds very small, but it I think is really pervasive, which is that the open workshop model, meaning that there's a shared Google Doc, has been so useful for our community. I've seen it used in workshops. I've seen it used in classrooms. We have one person who took it into a deaf classroom and started using it so that they ran the entire class through a Google Doc essentially. And then also for focus groups, things like that, I've seen it really kind of explode and get used in a bunch of different areas. So while that may sound small, it's something that we've written a couple of pieces on, and we've got more folks taking these skills and trying to sort of essentially model how to do openness in a broader way. And I would just say that's one of my favorite things about OLX and about what we do from this is how much we can take inclusivity and make it more, and make there be more avenues for participation in discussions and workshops that we do. Bo, I will see to you. Is there stuff that I missed? What did I miss?
No, I just want to add a quick observation that reflects some of the things I've heard people mention before, including with the open life science. And it's the question of, what about specific topics? And, like part of like our design originally, right, we were focused on like folks transitioning out of academia. We initially, like at very first, with the cohort, had a focus on folks in the social sciences and humanities, because we felt those are the folks that aren't as used to doing open projects. But it's kind of been part of our trajectory to like not be in the business of defining ourselves in terms of topic. And we're realizing over time that actually comes with difficulties on multiple areas. The biggest one for us, because we're into open projects, is the passion and joy often tends with open projects tends to be in topics and specifics. There's specific things that we want to see happen in the world. There's specific things that we can get folks to rally behind. There's specific things we can get movement building, around. And that's an area that's been tricky for us to navigate, and we're experimenting currently with like ways of doing that. And that small project we did with Open Problem Workshop was part of us experimenting with this. And stay tuned for more on this, from us with, for next year.
Any questions for Beth or Bo?
I do. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, Andre.
So from what you're saying, it sounds to me that you're focusing on something that we've been thinking a lot about here as well, like on the university where I work here, basically that the students, they pick up all of the skills that are not necessarily transferable, or they don't know how to do it, right? And we've been thinking, how can we incorporate more of these skills like throughout their program? So are you guys thinking in a way also in that sense? Is this something that you're trying to like do the program as it is, which sounds great, but then also like how can you make a top-down approach so that this is kind of like already ingrained into like the process of graduating? And then, you see what I mean? Or does that make sense?
Part of what
Sorry.
no, it's okay. Part of what we've been struggling with. So folks leave academia, or maybe they're still in academia and they're trying to figure out what to do next. And one of the challenges is in the academy, if you have a PhD, you often look to writing a book or writing a peer-reviewed article. And those are your two examples of what you should do to be able to get cred, basically credibility. And what we're trying to suggest is there's a lot more ways to do that. And they can involve writing articles but running workshops, doing things where you're sharing your knowledge in other ways, being able to create communities, running communities, that those kinds of things and those kinds of projects can start to add more outside of the academy. What we found is that our community really struggles with the idea of projects, and we're struggling with it a little bit too, because we want them to do projects. But when we say do a project, they get, oh, no, I don't have a project. And this is somebody who tells me that they don't have a project when they've been running this whole series of workshops. I'm like, you have projects, right? I know you do. It's just defining it like that. So we've been trying to experiment a little bit with like lowering the bar a little bit. How do we talk about these things without having them be kind of big deal? But then we're also sort of saying, well, maybe if we did them in community, we'd be more able to kind of pump each other up and make them a big deal. So, Bo and I both have done other work with Mozilla in terms of the accountability case labs for Bo and for myself in MozFest. Some of those things we can amplify other projects. So could we do something similar where we share information from folks and kind of help each other create more stuff? That's sort of what we're playing with a little bit right now.
Say the trustworthy AI working group model that Abby and Chad have been working on, for the last 2 years is also really inspiring for us as a direction for the future, as opposed to the focus on cohorts. I mean, we still like the cohorts idea, but right now that's kind of what we're talking about.
Yo's comment, people not realizing the work they do is valuable or project worthy makes me think of the CS&S Event Fund program. Applying for that grant was a joy because it appreciated stuff I do that academics rarely care about. Yeah, definitely. I mean, and that community too is very much connected, right? So all these open folks being able to connect is pretty awesome.
Malvika, do you have a quick question?
No, I'm going to leave the space for Daniela and add in the chat.
Awesome, thanks so much. Daniela.
Hi, it's okay. I don't need to. I'm just gonna say something very quick. I know it wasn't planned, and it's the end of the day.
We're happy to have you, please.
All right, sure. Hi everyone. So yeah, we have taken also the model and what we learned from fantastic open leaders pre-review. All three of us, Sam Hindle, myself, and Monica Granados, come from that. Actually, Monica joined the team because she was a mentor for us in that program. And so we applied it to reviewing. And so we started with a pilot that was 14-week long. We adapted it a little bit, but we had a cohort-based 14-week long kind of group with the 10 initial early career researchers who applied, 50% of which were self-identified as underrepresented minorities in the US. So it was very kind of North American centric on purpose, and on purpose focused on racial diversity for that small group. And then we paired them with journal editors that volunteered and were screened, and we developed training for the journal editors, which was also very interesting. You may imagine a bunch of people, like we called it like thought exercise. We hire folks to come in to do that part, and the whole curriculum is very centered not only on how to review, but also like system of oppression, how they show up in the process, and so on and so forth. And it's been like an incredible journey in developing that curriculum with Antoinette Foster who helped. But long story short, what now that is developing, we're hoping to do another cohort. It's really taxing for us. Basically, I'm the only person full-time now on the team, but it's something we want to fund more funds for. But it's also, we created like smaller ways of doing that, such as the working open workshop was that smaller version of it. So we have now workshops that we are delivering to groups, and we kind of, it's much more, it's a 3-part workshop. It's much smaller and rapid, and kind of we lost the mentorship component there. But what we're doing is that we are groups that are interested in kind of continuing this work on their own. We do some we offer some training for how they can do it. So I wouldn't say that we are there for scaling yet, but definitely everything that we lived and breathed during Mozilla is kind of come up in our work. So we're very excited. And now the last collaboration is to do this with grant reviewers. So there are a bunch of funders that want to change the way how grants are reviewed. And so we've been hired to actually help them develop that program, and we call that Open Grant Reviewers. So that is a big deal for us, and I can't wait to see what comes out of it.
Gosh.
Thanks for the floor.
Very, very cool. Thanks so much for sharing. So as we wrap up, Abby, what's your takeaway?
Oh man, it was so exciting just to hear what all these programs have been up to. I think a lot of you know I've been on parental leave, so I haven't been as on top of everything that's going on. So just hearing this update, it's just amazing. I think my takeaway is just is that openness is working, that people are doing this work around the world, and you're all these excellent open leaders, and you're inspiring others, and just huge thanks for doing the hard on the ground work. Thanks to all of you.
Thanks, Abby. I mean, I think to me, it's been so cool to hear everybody share this morning, and the impact that you and Chad have had with open leaders on us and on all of these groups, I think is profound. So it's been cool to see it all tied together. Julie.
Yeah, just being mindful of the time, and knowing that we could have planned a whole summit on this so that we could all share more stories and tips. But we do have a efficiency tip and an inclusion tip in the doc. These are the way that we've started ending all of our cohort calls. So there's a keyboard shortcut that you can play around with using the arrow keys and in combination with things. And an inclusion tip is, as we become braver as being allies for other people, something that we've been practicing or trying to practice is to ask the question, what makes you say that? To help other people reflect on their language, or to sort of challenge their language in a way that doesn't feel as scary for us as a way to start. So we wanted to pass that forward too. That's from the Better Allies newsletter. And there are some links for Abby and Chad on Twitter, and you can follow us on Openscapes as well, and join us at other events. And we'll figure out a way to keep these conversations going, because it's so awesome to see all of you, and it's been way too long. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day and happy holidays. Stay safe, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, Julie.